welcome everybody to the next podcast in our Unsolved Mysteries story. With me today is Ellen Steverson, owner of Starting Block Career Services. She represents the private sector industry viewpoint, and I am Nancy Siegel, Solutions for the Workplace, and my focus is really on the federal government. And today we're going to talk about plans. And there's lots of kinds of plans out there. And how do those plans interact with your career? So, Ellen, take it away.
Hi, Nancy, and thank you for having me again. So one of the plans that we want to discuss today is from the private side is a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And this plan is very important because the last recording we did, the last podcast, we discussed your first day at work. But really, what happens next? So you make it through your first day. What are you going to do the next 30, 60, and 90 days? And that's where this plan comes in. So that's important. Now, do they use that on the federal side, Nancy?
So on the federal side, individuals are not really expected to come in with a plan. During the first 30 days as a federal employee or in a new job, your supervisor should be working with you to put together your performance expectations. But that's a little bit different than what you're talking about. The other thing I see a lot of is individual development plans. And so we'll talk about those as well, but let's start out and talk about what exactly you mean by a 30, 60, 90-day plan.
Yeah, so what is it? So basically, it is a plan that you're writing up to show that you really understand the role. And in the private sector, it can be used two different ways. A lot of people in the resume writing industry will talk about the 30, 60, 90-day plan as an interviewing tool that you can write one up and leave one during the interview process.
And that's to communicate what?
That again, you understand the role of the job. This is what you're going to do for the company. So this is company oriented. It is about how you will help the company over the next 90 days so that they will want to hire you.
So it's basically a sales pitch. Here's what I can do for you.
Exactly. So that's when it's used for an interview tool. However, when you get to your new job, you might not have a boss the first couple of weeks that's going to sit down and really go over, like you're saying in the federal government, they kind of start your performance information right away. They might not do that in the private sector. And again, it's your job to develop yourself. So this 30, 60, 90-day plan that I'm talking about helps you understand and create a plan that you can review with your boss, which really shows your boss if you understand the job well, or at least you're trying to understand the job. And then when you're meeting with him, you have something to discuss, you have something to write on, and something to develop, which they will like. They will see that as, hey, he took the initiative. So the first 30 days, again, is just you're getting acquainted with the new role. What is the objective? So your objective might be to meet the team members, maybe try and have lunch or coffee with each person on the team, or any key stakeholders, getting to meet them and having short little webinars or conversations or whatever your company is able to do so that you're building these relationships. You know, don't wait for a boss to come and tell you what you should be doing when it comes to building relationships and developing yourself.
So let me ask you, and certainly doesn't matter whether you're working for the federal government or the private sector, that first 30 days is all about figuring out what your job is, starting to build those relationships. But what I hear you suggesting is that you actually write that down somewhere.
Correct.
And hand that off to your boss. You're going to tell your boss, oh, during these next 30 days, I'm going to meet people. Is that the suggestion?
Yes, it is actually. You don't have to provide your boss a copy unless he would like one. But what you're basically doing, it's just like a salesperson has a a 30-day, 60-day, or 90-day plan on who they're going to call, who they're going to do. So there's really nothing wrong with actually writing out a plan of who you want to build relationships with, because you might be thinking, oh, I need to build a relationship with this internal team, when actually it's a different team. So you might think that you need to build a relationship with the sales team when really it's the marketing team you need to partner with. So again, it clarifies who your internal partnerships should be with, who you're trying to build relationships with. Again, having these conversations with your boss, having a plan makes you more effective at your job, regardless if you're handing it in or not.
And I get that. And I see the value of committing something to paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Giving yourself internal time frames and specifics to hold yourself accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I guess where I'm sort of struggling a little bit is the handing over of that to your boss.
So that can be common depending on the industry you're in. And I definitely have tons of different stories. I had a girl working in Manhattan, and the first 30 days when she went for her 30-day review, her boss was a little bit annoyed with her that she didn't have a plan and wasn't spending her time during the previous month building relationships. She was so nervous. She was basically coming into work with blinders on and just sitting at her desk, frantically doing whatever the job was, a task, without building relationships. So had she had a plan, discussed it with her boss, then it would have showed initiative, drive, again, fitting in with the culture, all of those things. So she really did have to kind of go back and really kind of smooth out some bridges that she might have burned, because again, she was so nervous. The company had a policy she could put those earbuds in, and she was ignoring people. So yes, it can be very different in the private world.
Okay, so that's the first 30 days. What do you think this 60 days should be?
The 60 days, first of all, you always want to evaluate what you did the month before and what you need to still improve on. You know, if you found it helpful to work with 1 or 2 or 3 people, you need to keep cultivating that relationship. But then in the next 60 days, you definitely want to figure out your strengths, determine kind of resources you need, determine the resources at hand so that you can have impact. You know, you really should be looking for areas where you can contribute to the company with some type of metrics tied to it. A lot of employees make mistakes. Well, my boss didn't say I had to make so many phone calls a day, so I just made a few. You know, again, really start thinking about all of the things you do in the day and keeping a metric towards it, so you can show that you're improving, doing whatever. So that's your next 60 days, is you're trying to optimize or have optimal impact in the job you're at.
So one of the things I really liked about what you just said is establishing a metric and tracking. That is so important, because all the time when I work with clients, I'll say things like, what'd you accomplish? Well, I did my job. Okay. What differentiates you from the people sitting on the other side of your cubicle wall? And so getting in that habit of establishing metrics, whether yourself or those metrics come through your boss, but tracking your accomplishments. That's so huge.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that, Nancy. A lot of times people want to blame their boss for not telling them, but in reality, you have to take ownership. The question is, did you ask your boss? And most of the time, people aren't asking those questions, so they really don't keep track of anything. And what does that say about you? That you should know that metrics are tied to every job. You know, when I ask people, did you do the job? Yeah. How do you know you did your job well then? They're like, well, I do my job. Well, do you do it well or do you stink at it? Well, I do it well. Well, how do you know that? How can you prove that?
It?
Right. Prove it. And that's where metrics and numbers come in. I just helped a young girl for an internal job, and she said, well, I saved the company money. So, well, how much money do you save them? $1,000 or $1 million? What are we talking?
Or $1.
Yeah, or $1. And she really had no clue. And she immediately said, being young, she said, well, my boss doesn't tell me. I said, well, do you have a meeting this week? And she said, yes. I said, well, how about in the meeting this time, maybe you ask the project I'm working on, have I saved any money? And I got an email last night and I was blown away. All she wrote was, Ellen, in a meeting, he recognized that I saved $1.2 million in savings because I asked.
Ding, ding, ding,
Voila,
ding,
ding,
ding.
ding, ding. Exactly. So she got recognition. He probably was like, hey, good job. He probably would have never done that if she didn't ask, because he's not thinking about that, right?
Well,
But
the other thing is she needs to put that in her file because
She-
she'll never remember in 3 weeks.
That's right. Or 3 years from now when she does her resume, or 2 weeks from now. Yes. So you want metrics for multiple reasons, or better yet, even on your performance evaluation. You know, when you go on your 1-year performance, you can't expect your boss to remember everything about you. You have to come to the table prepared too. So a nice little, hey, remember back in, December of 2020, I saved the company $1.2 million. Okay, blow his mind by remembering these things.
Another great point. I am a huge fan, and we're a little off track here, but
Mhm.
I am a huge fan of employees writing what I call a self-assessment
Mhm.
or an accomplishment report that goes along with their performance review. If you don't have metrics to start with and track them and get in the habit of keeping them up to date, you can't possibly come up with your self-assessment or accomplishment report because no one cares about your career more than you do. This is your job. It is not your boss's job.
Right, absolutely. I agree with you. And again, it's amazing how many people could care less about their career because they think somebody else should be promoting them along when it's really you who should be doing these things.
So let's talk about 90 days, and then I want to get back to focusing
Right.
on our own career.
Right. So the 90 days, again, is you've gone through the 30 and the 60 days, and now you're going to look for gaps where you can make improvements. Maybe it's time to launch and implement an idea that'll address a critical issue that maybe you've discovered. So now here's the next phase where you can kind of come in and really give some specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals.
Sounds smart to
Smart.
me.
That's right. I knew you'd get that. So again, the 90 days is really important as well. And then from there, have a conversation with your boss. Do you want to carry this on at 6 months, a year? Just think of the great relationship you're building with your boss over these first 90 days by coming in prepared and looking like you took the initiative and care about the company.
Totally there.
I will say it can be a Word document, a PDF, it can be a PowerPoint, it can be an Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Just be organized and make a plan.
Absolutely. A format doesn't matter. It's the setting of goals for yourself, holding yourself accountable, and taking it forward. And so when I think about plans, I don't think about them so much in the way you framed it, although you're making me rethink the ideas that you have. I usually think about plans in terms of development plans. I hear again and again from employees how they're not being developed at work. And to me, your supervisor or your manager cannot develop you. You can only develop yourself. So when I think about plans, I'm thinking about it more from a personal career development. And I'm a big fan of individual development plans or professional development plans. Doesn't matter what you call them, but really thinking about where do I want to get to? Where am I sitting now? And what are the gaps that I have between the current state and my goal of a future state? And how do I close those gaps? And that to me is worth a written plan as well. Discussions with your supervisor are critical throughout it. Your supervisor and others can give you feedback because sometimes it's difficult for us to see ourselves. Getting that perspective, seeing if there's funding at the supervisory level. Are you allotted $1,000, $5,000, whatever it is? Is there some kind of budget in your organization per person? Are these things I need to fund myself? What are they? And I think the other thing that is important to think about is I see a lot of employees focused on training. And training is not development.
I agree with you 100% on that.
And the Center for Creative Leadership did a study a number of years ago, and they found that 70% of development is interacting with each other, with other people, right? Only 10% of development comes from training, what we traditionally think about as training. So when you're thinking about development, I think it's important for people to think beyond attending a class, but really think about shadowing opportunities, rotational assignments, those kinds of things. And the government's, quite big on all of that. So talk to me a little bit about how that works out in the corporate sector.
Well, in the private sector, now, again, I would say that at a corporate level, if you work for a large corporation like Amazon, Microsoft, these big corporations, you definitely do want to understand the packages as part of your benefit. Like, will they pay for college education? Will they pay for training? All of that. But, you got to remember, the majority of people in the world work for these smaller companies.
Yes.
And by smaller, I just mean a couple of hundred people. And they might not
Or
have fewer, right? I have some people that come to me work for 20 people, right? They might not have a training development or professional development program, anything formal. However, I would encourage everyone listening to this, that doesn't mean you don't have one. Again, this is your career, your life. You create one, and you might not speak to your boss about it, because if you have a boss who is not a pro supporter of professional development, then he doesn't need to know that you have a 3, 4, 5-year plan and what you're doing over the next couple of years. But please don't give up on professional development, because that's very short-sighted. You need to think about your career as a long-term journey. And what do you need to improve on? And really, when it comes to professional development, it could be as simple as I get anxious and I get nervous if I have to talk in a meeting. So I just don't do that. Well, guess what? Is that really going to help you move forward in leadership or move forward to whatever job you might want, when part of the next job you want is presentations, right? So exactly. So then you have to make yourself, okay, my goal this month will be to speak at least once at a meeting. Next month, I'm going to ask if I can present. The following month, I'm going to do a webinar. Like, you need to really encourage yourself and really develop those skills and seek out people who can help you, even if it's outside of your company. Maybe go to Toastmasters, a free speaking organization in your community, to gather these skills. So again, professional development is really on your shoulders, and you can do it without having a supportive company that might not be able to offer that because of their finances.
So the first piece, I think, is where do you want to go? What's your goal? Second piece here is self-assessment. Where am I in relationship to that goal? And getting feedback from people other than yourself, I think, is helpful.
And I would say on that note, really be careful of who you're asking for feedback. If somebody is in your inner circle and they are a crow that's constantly picking on your neck and they're always saying negative things to you, don't ask them for feedback. You know it's going to be negative, okay, and not even accurate, maybe. So again, really make sure you're finding people and surrounding yourself with people who can help you develop professionally. And if not, find them and search them out. When I got to Charleston, South Carolina years ago, I couldn't find people like me, working women with college degree, just wanting to work all the time. I had plenty of stay-at-home mom friends, which was great, but not a lot of working women. So I had to seek out a nonprofit that was starting and growing with professional women who really wanted careers. And that helped me form relationships with like-minded women.
Networking.
So again, networking and finding areas to be with like-minded people. Or I'd even challenge you sometimes to pick people who are not like your mind, so that you become more diverse yourself.
So I want to go back on one thing you said. What you say, the crow picking at your neck? I mean, I understand that, but you don't only want to ask your mom and people who worship
Yeah,
you
right,
for
exactly.
feedback either. I
Right.
think there needs to be a balance and look for a mentor.
Absolutely. If I could go back in time, that would be the one thing I would have worked on earlier in my career as mentors. It was just great that I graduated college, let alone finding mentors. And I think we're becoming more of a society about mentors, coaches, things like that. So people are becoming more and more used to that idea. But seek them out and find them. And I totally agree with you. I wasn't talking your mom or your husband or your kids. Kids, do you think I'm a great communicator? Yes, mom.
That's not what my kids
Yeah.
say.
Yes, you are, because you yell a lot. So anyhow, but you know what I'm saying. I agree. You need to have a professional
Perspective.
network.
So we've talked a lot about plans and really came to this with two different worldviews on what plans represent.
Right.
Your initial point, which honestly I hadn't given a lot of thought to, is using a 30, 60, 90-day plan as an interview freebie to show
Mhm.
you've prepared for the interview and the value you can offer an organization. I can tell you, while that may be very successful on the private sector side, on the federal side, it would be unlikely, in my experience, that they would either expect or accept such a document. And then you mentioned the kind of getting yourself off to the right foot at work. I like that a lot as a way to force yourself to integrate into a new organization, which isn't always that easy.
Mhm.
And then the third piece is the whole developmental piece, which we could all use. Did I miss anything, Ellen?
No, and I love the fact that we're giving options here. You can do it as a 30, 60, 90-day plan, or you can do it as an individual development plan. So use the plan that gets you to the right goal. And they can be used different ways. And individual development plan can certainly be used in the private sector world. It's just not something commonly referred to where it is in the federal government. So again, it's a great plan. And I think we should share both of these plans with our listeners today so they can read up and see what we're talking about. And, and again, if you just take the time over the next 90 days to really write a plan, I think you'll be better off for it.
All right. So thank you so much, Ellen Steverson, Starting Block Career Services. I am Nancy Siegel, Solutions for the Workplace. Please connect with us on LinkedIn, find our websites, and we look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please visit Nancy or Ellen's website. Nancy's website is www.solutions-workplace.com, or Ellen's website is www.getyouemployed.com for additional information about our services, a free tip sheet which highlights our discussion today, and be sure to tune in to our next podcast, which will be posted soon. Thank you.